Thank you. So welcome everybody to the second hour of MindShifters Radio, and today is Wednesday, March the 22nd, 2023, and our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. We'd love to hear your comments and questions, because that makes this your show. And Michael will get dialed in here in just a moment. And I was just looking. We have book club tomorrow on the 23rd. And I need to check with Yinka. I don't think that they changed time until this coming Sunday. So be 4 hours difference instead of 5 hours difference. And so that would be, let's see, instead of, the website says that it is at 3:30 our time, so that would actually be 4:30 our time. And then they'll change time zone again, and then it'll go back to being 5 hours difference. So confusion. But we'll get through that. And I'm still a little bit scattered. So there's just been so much going on, and we actually have a trip scheduled. We're leaving in the morning and meeting some of Michael's family up in New York, and Michael J. and Jamie and the baby are flying in, and Ryan and Gabby and Aria are flying up. So it'll be quite a bit of family gathered together for a week. I'll have to play a show while we're traveling tomorrow and possibly even Friday. It depends on when we get in there. But then we'll be live next week, calling from New York. Michael's coming up the steps and getting dialed in, so he'll be with us here in just a minute. And I don't think I've made any more changes on the website this week. It's been a little bit off kilter for us. For those who may not know, my father passed away on Saturday evening. And so just trying to get things settled. You know, we're not doing a memorial service until we get back, and some of the other family gets back from a trip. So we're doing that on the 5th of April. But we were already able to do our family time and viewing and everything on Sunday. But it's just a matter of trying to get things together, notify insurance companies and stop checks and just lots of things. So my mind's kind of in about 50 different directions, so I apologize for not being quite here. I did have a breath session Saturday morning before we went to visit Dad, and I kind of tapped into his energy and told him, you know, he had struggled long enough, and it was time to let go. And then when we finished the still point breathing class, and we went over to the hospital, and we were there about 30, 40 minutes, and he passed away. So we were able to be there with him and see that transition. And so now it's just trying to balance out and find a new norm somewhere. So continued prayers are appreciated. And I don't believe Michael's dialed in yet. Let me go see if he's having technical difficulties. So if you have a question or a comment, press 1. It puts a hand up. And then we know that you want to talk to us. All right. Susan, 610, you're on the air. Hi.
Hello, just a greeting. I'm going to leave the show in a little while because I'm in Ohio doing a college tour with a grandson, but there's a little hiatus in the middle. So I came into my hotel room and dialed you in, and it's great to hear familiar voices. But Jeanie, go easy on yourself. Holy mackerel.
Yeah,
You've been through the ringer. Oh, man. So I just wanted to commiserate and wish you well.
I appreciate that. It's actually been pretty smooth. I have times, you know, some ups and downs, but...
Yeah. I know. What shifts is way below the surface. You just feel the seismic adjustments. Something has changed. It's so deep.
That is true.
I'm glad
Tell us about it.
No, she's talking about me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I felt that with my mother, but I'm sure you feel it with your dad. And I felt it with my dad, too, and I did get that feeling that he was okay.
Yeah.
And then he lived on a canal in Florida, and one day a heron came up and came right up to us, and I said, "Daddy, is that you?" I mean, it was just so strange. He loved the herons, and we've never seen one come so close. Little things like that, but you don't know what they really mean. It just feels as if there's a little hole in the ozone, and suddenly you're hitched with something much bigger. But anyway, you must be feeling that sort of thing a lot now.
It's kind of weird not calling, because usually what I would do was call either the assisted living or the hospital in the morning and check on him, see how his night went, and then we would go visit later. And so it just is weird not making that phone call to somebody,
Right. Yeah. Well, anyway, carry on. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's pretty awesome that this is her third night of 7.5 hours of sleep.
Wow. That is
for the first time in what? 5 years, maybe longer?
It's been a while. I actually got a few long nights when you were up in Kansas City because I would just go to bed so early. And I have found that is a clue for me. Right. I found that's a clue for me to go to bed earlier because even with the wake-up time during the night and all of that, if I go to bed earlier, because my alarm goes off, my internal alarm goes off between 7 and 7:30 every morning. So if I don't go to bed till 11, it cuts my time shorter anyway. Adjustments all the way around.
Holding the space. So, Miss Susan, how are all those young men around you doing?
Well, I'm with
Michael.
One in sorry?
I was going to start to list them, Michael and...
Oh, that young man.
How is everybody doing?
Very interesting with that, Michael. Tim and I haven't wanted to tell him to leave. We were just trusting that the universe would show us what to do. And Social Security issues not only a regular check, but evidently there's something called SSI. Maybe you know about it, Social Security Insurance, which is an additional payment to people who are homeless. That's my understanding. And he was getting $300 a month in addition to his Social Security, his regular Social Security, and he was living on the combination of the two of those. A woman called him up and said, I find that you've been living for 6 months with this at the same address, so I'm going to cut your check. You can't have that check anymore. Well, of course, poor Michael went into a total tailspin, and he couldn't even talk. His hands were shaking, panicked, and he got off the phone and said, please call this woman named Mrs. Wilson. Well, Mrs. Wilson wanted to know what our expenses were and how much our mortgage was if we had one, which we don't, how much our monthly payments for this, that, and the other were. And then she said, how much work is he doing? How is he earning his stay there? And I said, well, he fills the bird feeders and he does some vacuuming for us once a week. And she said, that's not enough. I'm cutting his check. And I said, look, this man is homeless. It was the dead of winter. We plugged him into our house, but he is still homeless. This is not his home. He's just borrowing some space to survive. You cannot cut his check. This will just make things worse. And this is what's wrong with our country right now. And she said, all right, then I will say that he has done $500 worth of work per month for you, and I won't cut his check. That was the end of that. But he knows that he can't stay with us. I don't know how long he'll be able to get away with staying with us, but it has kind of bitten his ankles a bit. And I think he's probably getting his gears in gear to find some sort of situation. But it's heartbreaking to see because this man needs support. How do you give him support? He can't live up here. he'll freeze to death.
Right.
Anyway, I've learned so much from him, and it's ongoing. But one thing he's forced me to take a look at is it's very hard for some people, and they need a lot of help, and they're not bad because they need that.
Right. Well, it ties in. I'm actually doing some writing. I don't know if you got our newsletter a week or so ago on the ACIM, and I've been since I wrote that, I've been doing just a whole other level of research and recognizing the importance of getting out of the sympathetic dominant state. In fact, I start the article out saying the most dangerous place in the world to live is in a mind, body, nervous system that's fueled by fear and or hostility.
Totally.
And realizing we've been doing more work. You've seen that video that I did for the ACIM medical, their medical doctors and such, on the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and realizing, especially in a case like Michael, that in that fear, flight, fright, freeze, fawning mode, the blood flow is cut to higher centers of the brain.
Yeah.
And people go into survival. And if they never get out of that survival mode, what for the average person would be relatively easy to figure out, that part of the brain isn't functioning. It just isn't there. Let alone the fact that everything to do with the ability to physiologically thrive has its blood flow shut down.
Yeah.
In order to move the blood flow, in order to move the energy to survival, the large muscles, arms, legs, the lungs, to get more oxygen in so that one can fight or run successfully. And when one lives in that state chronically, everything to do with thriving is shut down. And when that happens chronically, when that happens over an extended period of time, I'm just realizing this whole piece of the puzzle that takes it to a new level. In the system of medicine I'm trained in, the whole foundation of disease is congestion. And when you realize that in that survival mode, in that sympathetic dominance mode, blood flow is cut to everything to do with thriving, including the brain. And then when that happens chronically, of course, what happens when the flow in the stream is cut off? Well, organisms start to build. Gunk starts to accumulate. Congestion goes to a whole deeper level. So, as I was trained in medicine, it was congestion that's the key you've got to deal with. But now I'm realizing that it's what cuts the flow that creates the congestion. And it's that fear-based mind. That's the most dangerous place anybody could possibly live. And then, of course, next to that is a fear or hostility-based home, a fear or hostility-based workplace, and then come, in terms of dangerous places, then come hospitals, then come drugstores, and then come grocery stores. And until people realize that, nobody's returning to health. Everybody's struggling. We spend literally 10 times as much on what's called healthcare in America, and there's virtually no healthcare in America. It's all disease care. And it's all dealing with, we can shut this symptom down. Well, what happens if you have a symptom because there's a lack of blood flow to an organ and you drug that organ so that it doesn't hurt? Well, you just shut it down on a whole other level. And you shut it down and you shut it down and you shut it down. And they call, when you look at a body that has that happening, they call it aging, and naturally it dies because it's old. But it isn't. It doesn't have anything to do with old. It's got to do with, if you don't get oxygen nutrition to a cell, if you don't get the waste removed, if congestion builds up, the structure can't function. It just can't survive. So that's really hitting me on a whole different level. And of course, I was talking with Jeanie about that this morning. And then when you talk about Michael and realizing, he's a relatively healthy young man, relatively young, Sure, he could go out and do all that, but not if his brain isn't functioning, not if those higher centers aren't functioning, and that's the first place to get restored. If that doesn't happen, the things that are obvious aren't so obvious because those higher functions aren't happening. And then, of course, you follow that up with the fact that where that blood flow is restricted to the brain, now there's congestion. Now we've got a whole other level of brain toxicity happening. So, and it happens in every organ throughout the system. It's like I'm seeing more and more. This is the whole core of disease. And why can't people figure it out? They can't figure it out because the higher brain is shut off.
Mm.
So it's just, it's just coming clear to me on a whole new level what needs to happen. And until blood flow's opened up, now people can go out and, become runners, get the runner's high, and what's that? Well, the brain's starting to function. It's getting blood to it. Or they can go and sit in the hot tub, in Sweden, Norway, those countries. The hot tub is part of life. Everybody's in the hot tub every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates an increase in the temperature of the blood, which increases the opening, the movement toward parasympathetic operation and higher function. And those people are healthier. People who sit in a bathtub, people who move out of sympathetic dominance into parasympathetic. So, how do we get someone like Michael until he can start to, it's kind of like a reverse engineering for success in this case. And that is when I go into fear and hostility and I cut the part of my brain off that can start to understand and do something about it, of course, then I'm going to go into more fear and hostility, and it's a downward cycle.
Mm.
And that somewhere has to be cut and move in the other direction. And one of the most powerful places I know to cut it is you need to forgive those thought disorders that set the whole structure into fear. And, medically, sympathetic dominance, restriction of blood flow, is considered to be a physical thing, and it's got nothing to do with the physical. It's all about what people are doing with their minds. And if they go into fear, it's a signal to shut down for safety.
My grandson's at the door. To be continued. I have to go.
Sweet.
Thank you so much.
All right, young lady. Blessings.
All right.
Enjoy your time with your grandson. Okay,
Yeah,
bye-bye.
thanks. Bye.
Well, Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
Well, Doug's hand's up, but I think he was talking to Dr. Tim, but I'm going to turn on his microphone and just see if he was complete.
Okay, we haven't talked to Doug for a while, so.
Yeah. Hey, young man.
You with us? And Doug maybe walked away from his phone.
I see that.
Oh, there he is.
It was mute
the
challenge.
Mute challenge. I know that one.
Yeah. Yeah. How
haven't
you
heard
doing,
your voice
both?
in a while. How you be?
Well, that's quite a story in itself. But first, let me just say thank you for sharing all of your, to Jeanie and you both, but her in particular, sharing all the grace around your father's transition. That was a good thing to be aware of, and to hear that example of that grace that went with his transition. So
grace is the right word.
That.
It was.
Thank you. Right. It seems like. So, what you were saying about fear is certainly apropos. In fact, I was talking to Dr. Tim about his introduction on basically around the idea of being in a state of non-judgment about everything going on in order not to go into fear, and then just to act on the guidance that you get about what to do in every situation rather than judging it and therefore getting into fear. And that was somewhat helpful. I feel like I have a huge issue with both of those things, judging things and being fearful about so many things in this world that my judgment system says are wacky right now.
So the question, the question that I would offer to ask yourself at this point is the behavior that Dr. Tim was talking about that you're referring to here, is that a power person dynamic in your life? Because if it is, until you address it as a power person dynamic and clean up the power person relationship, it's going to tend to continue. And remember, when ultra stressed and the power person dynamic is operating, then we do what our power person did to us that we hated the most, or that they did to themselves that we hated to watch, whatever that behavior is. And so if it ties in and there's a power person dynamic beneath it that needs to be dealt with, again, remember, the way you tell who your power person is in any situation is whose behavior you do. So are they behaviors that you watch your power person do and took on as, this is the strategy for survival?
Well, now that's a whole nother angle on it. I mean, I was having a little trouble. I think I maybe didn't convey my conversation very well about Dr. Tim there, but nonetheless, just what you say, I can kind of relate it to the general theme of being in fear or in judgment, because that's, he was simply suggesting and talking about how you can live a life in where you conclude all events are neutral. And then instead of acting out of judgment, you simply act according to the inspiration of the light that's in you in every moment of what's there for me to do now. And that, and yet what you're saying, when I look at what you're saying, it's like, oh, okay, yes, I do have. Well, I have an adoption pattern, I would say, of seeing the world as being in crisis, which my father did. I mean, we would take walks all the time in which he would express his concerns about the state of the world and the insanity that he saw everywhere, and the distress that he felt over it. And I am certainly experiencing. That was his point too. Is the judgment? It's a constant state of seeing chaos and insanity everywhere and judging it as such, judging that that's what I'm seeing everywhere, and then being distressed about it in a state of fear. There's the number one error to look at. Have you caught in what you just said? And I'll invite you to go back and re-listen to the show and just listen to this sentence, the couple of sentences you just said. Have you heard the denial in it yet? Can you pinpoint the denial in what you just said? No,
because as long as there's denial, say again?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think I'm either I'm not understanding the question or I'm not seeing it, because what I recognize is that I'm doing the same pattern, that my father did.
Perfect.
And that I'm running judgment about everything.
Right.
And that.
And then the following words, there's your denial. Take the next words in the sentence that you used. And he's distressed about it. And I'm distressing over it.
About it. And I'm distressed about it. Okay.
So remember our definition of denial. When I think or speak, the cause of what's moving inside of us. So when I think Dad was in distress because of what was happening in the world, when Dad thought Dad was in distress because he thought it was about what was happening in the world, he hid the cause of his distress because he wasn't the least bit distressed about what was happening in the world. He was just distressed. And he would put it into, through denial, his brain's image of the world, and I'd offer that there's your challenge when you say, I'm distressed about it. No, you're not. You're just distressed. You've got a genetic pattern of being distressed. And you can put it into, your relationship with your mother or your father or your sister or your brother or your spouse or your used-to-be spouse or your maybe-to-be spouse or yourself or anybody else. Anybody who's in distress is in distress because they're in distress, not because anything happened in the world. And when I let go of that denial, then my mind can serve up to me in the presence of love that distressed energy, and it's going to dissolve. But as long as I remain in denial, in order for my mind to show me a picture that tells me, that proves to me I'm in distress because of what's happening out there, I have to hide the real cause of my distress. So I live in a picture world that shows me, yep, it's about that, it's them, it's that, it's that, it's that. And it's not. It's because there's distress energy in there. Pardon me. I just swallowed a little bit of water the wrong way.
Can I add something?
Go for it, Jean.
It just occurred to me, while you were gone to Kansas City, I did the Power Person worksheet, the long one that we did it during the intensive. And one of the things that came up was, that my ultimate, used to be leaving, and that Daddy always left. And during the breath session, I was able to that and actually tell him it was okay to go. And
give Dad permission to leave. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was
powerful insight.
Yeah.
And I suspect that one of the reasons he was holding on was because of the distress energy that you were in that seemed to be about him leaving, that was about your distress. And the minute you were able to process that and let go of it, and that Power Person worksheet is awesome at unraveling the mind, then he could let go because you could let go.
What did you identify as your stress, Jeanie, instead of his leaving?
Well, see, one of the things, Dad always left and went to the farm. And that was his way of dealing with surviving, I guess. And so my ultimate was always leaving. And then when he was sick, and I was finally able to say, you could go.
Breathing with you, sweetheart. Just be with it. Until just a few days ago. Up until just a few days ago, Jeanie could not talk. And I'm thinking back to we met 20 years ago, one of the first conversations we had. I don't know if you remember this, Jeanie, but one of the first conversations we had was that you knew that one day your mom and your dad were going to die. And you didn't know how you were going to handle that. Do you remember that conversation? Really early when we met? And up until, I remember it clearly. And it's something you've mentioned several times over the years. And through the Still Point session on Saturday, when you had that conversation with Dad internally and said it's okay to go, it's the first time I've heard you be able to refer to him leaving his body and not watch you get all tensed up and choked up, that you could breathe. And of course, none of us wanted him to leave, but it was for his highest good. And as Doug languished, it was full of grace for him to leave. And I think you pinpointed it right there, that you gave him that permission. It was no longer a goal that you had to hold on to that created all that stress.
And then I was able to, they were going to bring in the art and try to shock him back, and I was actually able to say no, let him go.
Yeah. Breathing with you.
And I don't know why I want to read this. I actually put it in the notes for last week. It might have been earlier this week. And I didn't get around to
read
reading it, but it's from the Course in Miracles, Fear of Redemption. And it says, you might wonder why it's so crucial that you look upon your hatred and realize its full extent. You may also think that it would be easy for the Holy Spirit just to show it to you and to dispel it without you needing to raise it to awareness. Yet, there's one more obstacle that you have interposed between yourself and the atonement. We have said that no one will countenance fear if he recognizes it, and yet in your disordered state of mind, you do not like it, but it is not your desire to attack. It is not your desire to attack that really frightens you. You are not seriously disturbed by your hostility. You keep it hidden because you are more afraid of what it covers. You can look even upon the ego's darkest cornerstone without fear. If you do not believe that without the ego, you would find it within yourself, something you fear even more. You're not really afraid of crucifixion. The real terror is of redemption.
Says a mouthful, doesn't it?
It's like, holding on and not really wanting to let it go because afraid of what I guess is going to be there if you let it go.
And what will be there, as you discovered when you let it go, is serenity and connectedness to being and connectedness to source. And that's where that piece that Dr. Tim was talking about, once I let go of the goals that drive my perception to pain, once I stop pretending that my pain is about something outside of me, my disturbance, my distress, my fear, whatever it is, something outside of me, then I can embrace that in love, process through it, and then I'll be alive, and I will know at every instant directly without any reference to the past. Two of the things the Course talks about, and this is something I've been practicing now for, going on several months, maybe as much as a year. One is being willing to let go of perception. Two, being willing to let go of memory. Because they're both things we created out of the past. And to do that, to trust that, what in the ancient teachings they called the mind of Christ, which is literally the mind of love, which we're born and bred in, that we can trust that at every moment. It will always give us better information than our perceptual mind and than our memory could ever give us out of the past, because the only thing he can give us out of the past is advice from our past generations, and they're all dead. So it really didn't work very well for them. But that's the only advisor we've got. The Course talks about, in order to do anything, you go to an advisor. You either go to the past, perception, and memory, or you trust that literally God's mind is available to you. Love's mind is available to you. Tell you anything and everything you need to know about what's going on inside of you, what's going on outside of you, what's going on in the future, what went on in the past. That mind is there. And I'm talking now just from my personal perspective. That's been a new insight for me in the last year or so. And then I've been working on really learning to trust. Hey, God's mind is better than anything I could ever figure out. But as long as I'm in denial, I think something outside of me caused this to move inside of me. And I never forgive as to that energy, i.e. I never find the goal that drives my mind to use it. Every time that goal is loaded in my mind will use that dissociated content and come up screaming so loud that I can't hear what was called the still small voice that is here to guide me through everything and literally knows everything. So I think spotting denial is a real key. Being able to recognize anytime the slightest thought comes that has me believe that something in the past in me is being served up because of something going on out there, which of course is ridiculous. Obviously it's in the past, it's in me. Something out there can't cause it. Something out there can certainly resonate, it can certainly move it. Can't cause it. Hence the importance of locating every goal that you hold that could bring up any form of dissociated content or bring any form of dissociated content into activity, and working with the forgiveness process to collapse into those parts of the mind from the past that scream so loudly we can't hear that subtle voice that's always there, and will flood every cell in our structure literally with active present love, whatever's going on. Does that make sense, Doug?
There's just so much. There's so much in this conversation, in my opinion, and what you're saying. I'm just somewhat the perception of the idea that I'm having. Well, okay, so mind-boggling is coming up in me. I don't want to say I'm mind-boggled, but it's like I feel like there's a level of like, oh my gosh, how can I grip all of this? How can I take all of this in and understand it and apply it, or simply experience it as a way of being? Because okay, so that's one thing that's awakened me, and the other is that I'm. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
How can I figure this out? And remember the codependence intensive. The number one pseudo solution of the non-being mind is if I could just figure this out. And the past can't figure it out. Perception can't do it.
No.
But you can forgive it. You can forgive it. You can apply forgiveness to it, and that will walk you through the other side of it. You don't have to figure it out.
I have I don't think I want to figure it out. I just want to comprehend it and be able to really grok it, really apply it, really experience it. And maybe that is figuring it out, but it feels like it's understanding to me.
Yeah. Well, I'll change my language then. The number one pseudo solution to the non-being mind is if I could just comprehend this.
Okay.
The mind can't understand anything. The mind, like anymore, your computer can spit out all kinds of fabulous information, but it does not understand one iota of what it's giving you. It's just spitting out what's in it from the past. That's all your mind can do. That's why I say you can't figure it out, you can't comprehend it, but you can forgive it. When you forgive us, there's the breath. When you forgive us to that, that's when the whole structure that raises up that says, oh no, I've got to have the answer here, or here is the answer. The way that resistance structure is collapsed is by canceling the goals that drive it. So whenever, I have to figure this out, I have to understand it. No, you don't. All you have to do is remove the untoward energy, and the only thing that's left is you. And you are created of the essential energy of the love of God. Can that fail? It's interesting. Churchianity has come up with, and I forget who the scholar was, that said, the biggest trick that Satan ever played was to convince us that he doesn't exist. My offering is the biggest trick that Satan ever played was to convince us that he does exist. And recognizing from the Aramaic, the word Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. And you'll notice that every time you turn to your past, which means your generations, for an answer, it will always generate another challenge, another problem, another reason to push it away. And that's why I say, but you can, in that instant, every time, collapse it and remove the barriers that block you functioning out of the truth of your created essence. So rather than grasping it, the solution is in letting it go. Then it's yours, because it will come back and teach you. But you can only learn what it will teach you when you're in the place to learn it, when you're in a sensitive period. You know, in Montessori education, it's an interesting system. They don't say, oh, every child at 4 has to learn the ABCs, and every child at 6 has to learn to add, multiply, subtract, and divide, and every child at 8 has to learn to read this level. They don't do that at all. They have several environments in the classroom, and the job of the teacher is to observe when the child is ready, when they're in a sensitive period for this piece of learning. So the 4-year-old ready to learn math gets put into the math environment and learns what the 8-year-old has been struggling with for years to understand, and learns it in minutes. To recognize our sensitive periods for spiritual growth, for awakening to who we are. And then, you know, who was it that said, get your bloated nothingness out of the way? Get this whole conversation that always comes up to block it. You know, oh, wait a minute, there's a problem with this. Oh, no, here's another. Well, here's another problem. Yep, and you know how many times you're going to forgive before that mind finally shuts up? Whatever the issue is, it'll be 77 times 70 times around that issue. Then once the resistor is collapsed, is defeated, the only thing left is who you are. The only thing left is who we are. Of course, really clearly says it. Teach only love, for that is what you are. And use words only to show the error of the world of darkness, of the world of words. And yes, remember the healing crisis, one of the steps in the process of healing is confusion. Because when pure being and pure truth is being poured into the mind, and the mind has other ideas, something that's not so pure in truth or being, then when those two meet in the space of conscious awareness, the energies mix and it's mass confusion. And that's the place to breathe, be patient, you don't have to figure it out. Just let yourself process through it. And you know, you've heard us talk 1,000 times about building the brain cells. The only reason for building the brain cells is so that ultimately you can understand how to remove the interference. And the interference comes from 1,000 generations of terror and trauma. And thinking that there's terror and trauma because of what's happening in the world. And nobody has ever been in any form of terror or trauma about what's happening in the world. The only people who've ever been in terror and trauma are people who have terror and trauma in them. And it's not about the world. It's not about the relationship. It's not about the money. It's not about the business situation. One of the earliest lessons in the course. I'm never upset for the reason I think. Oh, the mind, the ego will come up 1,000 explanations for the disturbance and the upset. There's only one. Oh, there's disturbance and upset in here. Can I figure it out? No. Can I fix it? No. Can I successfully blame somebody else for it and pretend I'm an innocent victim? No. Can I forgive it? Yeah, every time. And sometimes you might have to do that 10 times in a minute before the mind finally shuts up. And then the only thing that's left is the created essence of life, which is what you are. And then actual human life begins. And breathing is part of human life. So the signal that whenever the breath stops is when I need to forgive is absolute.
Mm-hmm. All right.
10 times a minute sometimes. And when I'm not so locked into my mind, when the stuff comes up and grabs me by the face and sucks me in, and I can step back and become the observer, the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions, that I can see that, oh, this is just an energy pattern in my structure. Not true. Creates all kinds of hallucination, especially around my power person dynamic. And the best, how did that line go in the Gambler? The best you can hope for is to die in your sleep. No, the best you can hope for is you can catch your mind at its game, forgive as to its content, and be freed of it. So then that line becomes, and the best you can hope for is to live eternally. Ego's rule is die in your sleep. The true rule is, best you can hope for is to live eternally. Full conscious awareness. But the trickster will come up with so many ways of sucking us back in. And so most people live in a world of make-believe. First they make it up, then they believe it, and then go out and produce the evidence to prove that it's true. When they could have had Rahma and forgiveness instead.
I certainly acknowledge the rich content and understanding and wisdom behind the words. Two questions sort of arise for me in all of this, and one is, well, I don't know, a lot of things arise, but the impulse is just the main impulse is just to be able to do as. But I am kind of intrigued with. We sort of went down a path of power person dynamic, and then I talked about walking with my father, and his experience of denial, and thinking he was distressed because of the state of the world. It gives me a certain freedom and open in breath just to say that. I know that just as I say that, talking about him being in denial and his distress of the world, and were we suggesting that experience for me was power person dynamic sort of coming into me in some way, that was
well, remember the three things that it takes. Yeah. Remember the three things that install a power person dynamic in a child's mind. One, the power person has more power over you than you do. Two, they're not functioning as love, i.e. they're functioning out of fear. Three, you perceive it as survival. So if my God, Dad, is telling me about how the world is destroying us and it's such a danger to us, and as a 4-year-old, 5, 10-year-old, is my field going to be under stress? This is survival. And remember, when one goes into that survival mode with a power person in who's not functioning as love, their field opens wide. I mean, literally thinking of this body as an energy field, it's just like opens up and becomes like a sponge and sucks in everything in the environment, which in this case would sound most likely would be Dad's fear about the state of the world and what was going to happen. And maybe, I don't know him or what his temperament was, maybe his anger about what was going to happen because of his projections. But whatever that was, Dougie was standing there, field open, going, taking it all in. In the future, and just see if this is accurate, having done that, if that's true, then the rest of your life is controlled, your behavior is controlled by 3 behaviors, depending what level of stress you're under. When there's no stress, you'll do what you did to get along with Dad. When stress starts to build, you'll shift out of that space and you'll shift into doing what you did to resist and survive with Dad. And then, when you become ultra-stressed, you'll do what Dad did that you hated the most. And it sounds like you weren't a very happy camper when Dad is railing about the state of the world and how destructive it is and is going to be. And so under stress, what does your mind turn to? Oh, my distress is caused by something. See, it's the state of the world. It's what this one's doing. It's what that one's doing. It's what that... No. It's what's moving in me, which is that energy that was sucked in from the power person. And what I need to do is presence that energy in front of active love, and the activity of active love will transmute or dissolve any kind of trauma energy associated with it. So I'm now freed of the past generations, and I have the mind of love to turn to for my advisor, which is exactly what I hear Tim was talking about, is I'm just in that mind where I know I'm safe, I know I'm covered no matter what, and I'll know exactly what to say. Line in the chorus. He who sent me will direct me. I don't have to worry about what to say. I don't have to worry about what to do, because he who sent me will direct me. That's the passage that I hear ringing in my ears when I hear you describe what Tim was sharing earlier. But
right,
if
that would be it.
If my power person dynamic comes up, though, in response to the goal I'm holding, with, the state of the world, that's the problem, then I can avoid looking at me and what's inside of me altogether, and I can just keep focused out there, and I can be a prepper, and that doesn't mean from love that I don't pay attention and go, there's some crazy stuff happening out there. I'm going to stay connected to love, and I'm going to do what I'm guided to do to take care of myself and my family. But I do that from a space of connected love, from a space of fear, because automatically, if I do it from a space of fear, the higher functioning of, one of the things you've done years of work with is higher brain learning. If the higher brain isn't engaged, which when we're in fear, it can't be because it doesn't have any blood supply, we're going to try to figure it out, but we're trying to figure it out from a corrupt database and a corrupt past and generations of advisors and thoughts that have killed everybody in the bloodline up to date. What if I were to say, okay, so I don't know, it sounds crazy to live without perception, without memory, which when I was, dealing with this myself, making the choice to go in that direction, it was like, but what, that's crazy. Well, no, it makes sense. Perception is just a reflection of everything in the past. And what is memory but the past? Am I going to be alive in the present and trust that there is a mind of love that is live and has been alive for eternity that will guide me? I can reject that mind and say, no, I don't believe it. I'm going to stay with this fear stuff and make sure I can be a prepper and take care of myself. But then, then I'll bring about the wonderful lesson that Job gave us after all that he went through, which is, if you read it, it's just a major healing crisis. And you hear Job in the last analysis says, oh, I got it. That which I feared most has come upon me. What was Job's big mistake? Go read that book. It's awesome. Job is a good and upright and righteous person. But right at the beginning, what does he talk about? He has a fear that his kids aren't going to be so upright. He loses it all. And then he goes, I got it. That which I feared most, with fear as the amplifier, I set it up in my world. And once that was forgiven, everything was restored. So it's just, at some point I have to make a choice as to which I'm going to trust. But the arguments of the ego are so subtle and so seductive and seem so true. And if it weren't for the fact that I'm a creator and am helping to create it, I should really be afraid of it. It's another great line in the Course is that you think that the problem's outside of you. If the problem were outside of you, you would really be in trouble. But it's not. And that's a tough lesson to get when you live in a world. I mean, you and I, everybody that I know, by the time they were 3 or 4, became a card-carrying member of the one world religion of blame. Everybody I know. Everybody. A lot of churchianity today, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of fear-based, oh, the one world religion of Satan is coming. No, it's not. It's here. It's been here from the beginning. It's the religion of blame. I mean, go back right to that, one of the first conversations Job had. Oh, God, that woman you gave me. Oh, so it was the woman's fault, and then it was God's fault for giving him the woman. That's where the one world satanic religion began. And Satan means the resistor, one who misleads, not the dude with the red suit, the tail, and the pitchfork. His greatest trick was to convince us he existed. And all it is a resistance in our own minds, and our own minds misleading us because of our denial, dissociation, and projection. Remember, when I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I have to dissociate from the real cause. And then, by dissociating, I add energy to it. I'm going to draw somebody in to resonate that. And then that which they've just resonated in me, which I'm in denial of, I'm going to use to build my brain's image of them. I'll project that content into my brain's image of them. And I'll have a really strong verification that it really is about them, because after all, I can see it. It's as plain as the nose on my face. I see it with my eyes. Well, actually, you've never seen anything with your eyes. You've only seen things with your brain. And your brain makes up the world you see.
Is the resistor, I know we're into the final second.
The resistor
not accepting,
one who misleads.
Not accepting. Okay.
Resistor,
and not
one
accepting
who
events
misleads.
as neutral? Okay, that would be
well,
different. All right.
I think that would be one of the effects, but that wouldn't be part of the Aramaic definition. The Aramaic definition is pretty straightforward. The resistor, one who misleads. So I'm in a turmoil or a trauma again, and if I'm stuck in Satan, my mind's going to tell me that I'm in this again because of what Harry did, or Mary did, or Hortense did, or the world did.
So that's the mislead, the denial.
That's the mislead.
The blame.
Exactly. I mean, listen to anybody that you say, gee, I've been watching and I've seen you go through this 87 different times with 42 different people, this hostile mindset. Maybe it's about you. Do you ever think that? What is the average person going to say to that? No, not me. Let me tell you about Harry over there. There's the resistance, and now I got a whole story to mislead me and mislead you about how it's about Harry. It's got nothing to do with me. Well, yeah, I have been through it 87 different times with 42 different people. It's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
All right, my friend, you have a blessed one. We're down to the last few seconds. This show's going to cut us off, but lots of love and blessings. Take care. Appreciate the conversation. Great questions. Blessings. Bye-bye.